Hello and welcome to this screencast on flexibility. So looking at the specification, it's very similar to aerobic capacity and strength. We need to know different types of flexibility, the factors that affect flexibility, methods of evaluating, training used to develop flexibility, and then finally the physiological adaptations from flexibility training. So first of all, looking at exam questions, this is a example exam question you may get on flexibility. There are many more. You can get examples of methods of evaluating flexibility, adaptations, as well as the different types of flexibility training. So define static and dynamic flexibility, use practical examples to show how each type of flexibility can be beneficial to the performance. Beneficial is really important because you have to talk about how the flexibility benefits them as opposed to just an example of flexibility. So types of flexibility. First of all, what is flexibility? You're not going to really get asked just for the term of flexibility. However, it is important you do get a general idea of what it is, and it is the range of movement available at a joint. Okay. So two types. First of all, dynamic flexibility. Dynamic flexibility is the range of movement at a joint, or at a joint taking into account the speed of movement. So the range of movement at a joint taking into account the speed of movement. A way to remember this would just be ROM/SOM. Okay, range of movement, speed of movement. A sporting example for this would be a straddle jump done at speed. You could also have a reach in netball. So a reach in netball, an example of how that benefit performance is because you could intercept the ball and gain possession for your team. If we look at static flexibility is the range of movement at a joint not taking into account the speed of movement. Okay, so static not taking into account the speed of movement. A nice little way to remember this is just ROM no SOM. So you've got ROM SOM for dynamic and ROM no SOM for static flexibility, no speed of movement. There are two types of static flexibility. The two types of static flexibility that we need to be aware of are also flexibility types of training. So it's important that we get these down. It's important that we know these and understand the difference between them because it helps us when it comes to types of training. So we've got static active. This is when the athlete takes joint just beyond the point of resistance. So active athlete, AA, try and remember it like that. And then we've got static passive. This is when your partner takes joint just beyond the point of resistance. I'll show you some examples of that within lessons specifically. However, just an example of static flexibility would be holding a static stretch, the splits in gymnastics. That would be an example there. So moving on, we have the factors affecting flexibility. So very similar to what we've done before. Training specificity, we've got a new one here with temperature, age, gender, and then another new one, joint type. So it's very similar to tag G we've had tag, now we can have tag J or tag T. Just remember the double T at the start. So training specificity, you have got aligning training to increase flexibility, e.g. P&F training. Your training has to be specific to improve flexibility or increase it. Temperature, the higher the temperature means more elasticity within the muscle, therefore increases range of movement. Age, flexibility decreases with age as connective tissue hardens and loses elasticity. Gender, females have higher amounts of estrogen, therefore higher flexibility levels. And then finally, joint type, it depends what type of joint we are talking about. So a ball and socket joint has much wider range of movement in comparison to a hinge joint. Finally, methods of evaluating flexibility. So there are two methods of evaluating flexibility, and the type of question you will get will be, first of all, to describe or explain methods of evaluating flexibility, compare methods of evaluating flexibility, or even discuss the advantages and disadvantages of evaluating flexibility. Therefore, within this one slide, I've tried to do all three for us. So we have goniometry and the sit and reach test are the two methods of evaluating flexibility. So if it's a compare question, I've split the page in half, and now I'm going to go through the comparisons once we've done this bit first of all. So equipment needed for goniometry. This is simply a 360-degree protractor. The method is simply you measure the joint angle. Where this can be done at any joint of the body. Validity, does it measure what it's saying it's measuring? Is it good? Yes, it's sport specific, okay, for goniometry. Is assistance needed? Assistance is required. And is it expensive or cheap? It is cheap. Okay, so then if we're looking at the sit and reach test in comparison, so we've got goniometry equipment 360-degree protractor, where the sit and reach test needs a box. The method for goniometry is measure joint to angle. Sit and reach test is you measure distance of your reach. Where is it for sit and reach test? It is simply the lower back and hamstring, so only the lower back and hamstring. In comparison, goniometry can be any joint of the body. Sit and reach test validity, it is not sport specific, okay? So in terms of comparing the two there, one is sport specific, the other is not. Assistance is not required for a sit and reach. And then finally, it is also cheap. So there is comparison. Well, first of all, we've got being able to describe both methods on their own. Then we're able to compare them by looking at that. And now if we're looking at advantages and disadvantages of each, we've got an advantage for goniometry is that it's any joint of the body could be measured. However, sit and reach test, the disadvantage is it only measures our lower back and hamstrings. Validity for goniometry, it is sport specific, which is good. It's an advantage. It's sport specific. You can measure any joint in the body, any different type of movement being created. Sit and reach test is not sport specific, therefore this is a disadvantage to this test. Assistance is required for goniometry, which is not an advantage to us at the moment because we need to get another person, which isn't great. You also need to be experienced at delivering goniometry. Sit and reach test, no assistant needed. That is good. That's an advantage for us. And then very finally, the end, they are both cheap, which is good, which is an advantage for us. So get down key questions on those for me, please. You've got potentially 12 questions here alone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 2, 12. So you've got 12 alone here. Then you've got questions for your other parts of what we've just done. Thank you, and I'll see you in lesson.